At my graduation dinner, my father slid a stack of papers across the table between the half-eaten appetizers and the cheap champagne and told me that if I signed them, we could all stop pretending I was his daughter. If you were sitting next to me that night, maybe nudging my knee under the table, giving me that look that means breathe, you would have felt the air change. You would have seen how my little cousin stopped scrolling her phone, how my aunt's hand froze halfway to her mouth with a forkful of salad, how the waiter hovering nearby suddenly got very interested in rearranging glasses. I remember the pattern on the tablecloth. Little gray leaves twisting along a white background. My brain focused on that for a second, because anything was easier than looking at the papers. You know those dreams where someone you love says something unforgivable, and you wake up clammy and relieved it was not real? That was my first thought. This was a dream, or a joke, or some twisted test I did not understand yet. It was not really my father, at a chain restaurant off the highway, telling his only daughter she could sign her way out of his life. But it was. My name is Grace. I am 23 years old, and the day I graduated from college, my family officially tried to disown me. That is the headline version. The viral video title. The shock hook. The slower truth is Messier. It starts years earlier, in a small house that always smelled like laundry detergent and resentment. There are 4 of us in this particular story. My father, Paul, who believed that the only valuable thing a girl could do was be pleasant and not cost too much money. My stepmother, Linda, who arrived in our lives when I was 8 with a suitcase full of perfume and an expression of permanent disappointment. My half-brother, Tyler, for years younger than me, golden from the moment he was born. And me. I do not remember my mother much. She left when I was 6. The official story was that she could not handle responsibility. The unofficial one, pieced together from overheard arguments and a couple of brittle comments from my aunt, is that she had wanted more than my father knew how to give, and he would rather rewrite history than admit he failed at something. He did not talk about her. I learned early not to ask. When he met Linda, I was 7. She worked at the bank and wore crisp blouses and had a laugh that sounded like she wanted everyone to hear it. She brought me a doll on their second date. She told me she had always wanted a daughter. She said it like I was a prize she had been waiting to collect. She moved in 6 months later. Year 8 of my life smelled like new furniture and candles and wine. At first, she tried. I will give her that. She braided my hair. She helped me with school projects. She cheered from the sidelines at my terrible soccer games. She told me that with her around, my father would not have to worry so much. She hugged me, stiff at first, then more easily. When Tyler was born, everything changed. You know how some people say their world expands when a new baby arrives? Ours shrank. It shrank down to the size of a blonde, colicky infant who never seemed to stop crying and who, somehow, could do no wrong even when he screamed directly into your ear at 3 in the morning. My father turned into a man who only had 2 settings, exhausted adoration for his son, and sharp impatience for everything else. Linda turned into a mother in the fullest, most tunnel-vision sense of the word. Her hair was always in a messy bun, her shirt always had a smear of something on the shoulder, and her eyes always had that wild glow of a person who would burn the world for this one small person. I became extra. Extra noise. Extra mess. Extra cost. They did not say it like that. Not at first. It was in the little things. How I was asked to be quiet more often. How my school events were skipped because Tyler was sick or tired or fussy. How my father started using the phrase "we do not have money for that" whenever I needed new shoes. Then came high school. I was the kid who did homework because it made sense. Not because someone told me to. Not because I thought it would lead to some huge payoff. The structure of it calmed me. There was a question, and I could find an answer. I liked that. My father did not understand. He saw me reading and said things like, "You think that book is going to pay the bills?" He said it with a laugh, but there was an edge to it. Linda told me it was cute that I liked school. She said she had never been much for classrooms herself, that real life was where it mattered. Tyler, meanwhile, was the center of gravity. He did okay in school when he felt like it. When he did not, my father blamed the teachers. When I came home with a 98 on a math test, my father said good, without looking up from his phone. When Tyler scored a 70 and passed by the skin of his teeth, my father put the paper on the fridge. By senior year, I had one clear goal: get out. Not in a rebellious way. In a survival one. I applied to colleges quietly. I filled out financial aid forms. I wrote essays late at night at the kitchen table while everyone slept. I did not expect help. I did not get any. Linda said college was expensive and that I should not assume my father could just open his wallet for me. When the acceptance letters came, they all had numbers attached. Money I did not have. The only one that made any sense, the one that came with a merit scholarship big enough to make the others irrelevant, was from a state university 2 hours away. Not glamorous. Not far. But away. I remember the day I told my father. He was at the kitchen counter, sorting mail. Bills, flyers, a glossy brochure from a dealership he could not afford but liked to dream about. I put the letter on top of his pile. He opened it, scanned, frowned. He asked me if this meant I was really leaving. I said yes. He sighed. He said he did not know why I was in such a rush to run away from my responsibilities. He said his father had never had the chance to go to college, and look how he turned out, building a life with his own hands. He did not say congratulations. Linda chimed in from the sink. She asked about costs, about whether I could work part-time, about whether I understood that my moving out would not stop bills here from coming in. In the end, they agreed to contribute a small amount to what the scholarship did not cover. They framed it as a loan. They had no paperwork. I had no leverage. It was vague and heavy and dangled over my head from that day on. I moved into a tiny dorm room with a stranger who became a friend. I worked in the campus library. I ate food from a meal plan that always tasted slightly like cardboard. I breathed. At school, I studied social work. People had reactions to that. Some impressed, some judgmental. My father's reaction was a snort. He said I would spend 4 years and thousands of dollars to become a professional meddler. He said social workers just took kids from their parents and blew up families that could have fixed things on their own. He said if I wanted to help people, I should become a nurse. At least then there would be a paycheck. Linda just shook her head and said at least I would have a degree to put on the wall. Every time I came home on weekends, I brought laundry and a quiet hope that maybe things would be different. Maybe absence would make them softer. Maybe they would ask about my classes. What actually happened was that I did chores, watched Tyler while they went out, and listened to Linda complain about how expensive groceries had become. Tyler grew taller, more handsome, more reckless. He started skipping school, staying out late, smoking weed in the park behind our house. When teachers called, my father said boys will be boys. When I suggested he might need boundaries, Linda told me not to act like his mother. Money was always a shadow. It followed every conversation. My father's job at the factory was unstable. Linda's hours at the bank were cut. They took out a small loan against the house. I heard the whispered fights late at night about late payments. I started sending home $50 a month from my library job. Then $100. It was never acknowledged but always accepted. By junior year, I was tired in a way that had nothing to do with classes. That was when my grandmother died. My father's mother, Margaret, lived in a small apartment downtown filled with plants and quiet. She had been the one person in my family who looked at me and saw something other than inconvenience. She folded my laundry when I was little and told me I was smart out loud, like it was a fact. She slipped me $10 bills when she could and told me to buy something that was just for me. She had a small funeral. Modest. She would have hated anything showy. Afterward, in her apartment, my father walked through the rooms with a blank expression. He touched her armchair, her teapot, her books. He said he had no idea what to do with all this stuff. I stood in front of her bookshelf, running my fingers along the spines. Cassette tapes of old radio plays. Gardening guides. A couple of worn novels. A black binder tucked at the end. I pulled it out. It was filled with plastic sleeves holding documents. Birth certificates. Old bills. A will. I did not open it then. I handed it to my father. I wish I had looked. A week later, he told me that Nana had not left much. A bit from her savings, barely enough to cover the funeral. He said there was nothing to split. He said we should all be grateful she had not left debt. I believed him. Because why would he lie about his own mother? Semester drifted into semester. I interned at a local community center. I sat with kids whose parents were struggling, with parents whose kids were slipping away, with teens who had the same tight, angry look I used to see in the mirror. I loved the work. I saw, over and over, how one supportive adult could make the difference between someone giving up and someone hanging on. I tried not to think about what my life would have looked like if my grandmother had not been there for me. Senior year approached. Graduation stopped being an abstract future and turned into a date on the calendar, circled in red. I sent my father and Linda the information about the ceremony months in advance. I ordered my cap and gown. I triple-checked with the financial aid office that all my fees were paid and that I would, in fact, get to walk. In April, my father called me on a Tuesday afternoon. He never called. We texted occasionally about logistics, but an actual call meant something was wrong. He sounded tired. He asked if I knew how much they had paid toward my schooling over the years. I said it was around $5,000 total. He corrected me. He pulled out numbers. He included money my grandmother had given me. He included the $50 here and there I had sent home and then they had resent to the bursar's office. He twisted every exchange into a ledger where I was the debtor. He said he and Linda were struggling. He said Tyler was having trouble at school and might need a tutor. He said that after graduation, it was time I started paying them back. I reminded him gently that I was going into social work, not investment banking. My starting salary would not be glamorous. I would have loans to pay off. I would be barely keeping myself afloat. He said that was not his problem. He said he was not a charity. He said families helped each other. I almost laughed at that. I did not. We hung up with no real resolution. So when I invited them to my graduation dinner, I did so with a knot in my stomach. It was not even my idea, the dinner. My friend Kayla had suggested it. She said it would be nice to celebrate properly, not just fast food on the way home. She knew a restaurant that did a fixed-price menu for large groups. She offered to help me book it. I made a list. My father, Linda, and Tyler. My Aunt Denise and her husband. My cousin Lily. Kayla. 2 other close friends. My field supervisor from the community center, Mara, who felt more like family than most people who shared my blood. The day of graduation was brutally hot. The ceremony dragged. Names, speeches, mortarboards. My father fidgeted the whole time. Linda complained about the seats. Tyler scrolled his phone until my name was called. Then, to be fair, he did clap louder than anyone else. I walked across the stage, shook the dean's hand, smiled for the camera, and felt nothing and everything at once. Afterward, outside, everyone hugged me. They took photos. They handed me cards with a little cash tucked inside. My father said good job. Linda said now the real world starts. Mara squeezed my hand and told me she was proud. The dinner was at 7. By then, the sky had gone from blinding blue to soft pink. The restaurant was one of those places with laminated menus and fairy lights strung around the patio. Not fancy. Not trashy. Just nice. We sat at a long table. People ordered drinks. Tyler flirted with the server. My aunt made a joke about being underdressed. Kayla toasted me with her iced tea. For the first 20 minutes, I allowed myself to relax. We talked about plans. My friends asked what kind of job I wanted. I told them I was interviewing at a nonprofit downtown. Mara mentioned she might have contacts in the county office. Tyler asked if I could get paid to take children away from bad parents. Linda told him not to be rude. My father was quiet in that way he gets when something is brewing. The food arrived. Chicken, pasta, overcooked vegetables. People dug in. I was just starting to cut into my chicken when my father cleared his throat. He reached into his bag and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it onto the table in front of me, between my plate and my water glass. He told me he had something important for me to sign. There it was. That moment. That breath. My stomach clenched. I asked, quietly, what it was. He said it was only fair. He said I was an adult now. He said it was time to make things official. He said that if I did not plan to pay them back directly, then at least I could release any claim on the house and any of his assets when he died. My aunt choked on her drink. My cousin stared. He kept going. He said I was the one with the degree, the one who was going to go off and build a life, the one who clearly did not need them. He said Tyler was the one who would stay close, who would look after them when they were old. He said it was only fair that Tyler inherit the house. He said he wanted no disputes later. He said this way, we could all be at peace. I stared at the folder. The restaurant sounds faded. The clink of cutlery, the hum of conversations, the tinny music from the speakers. It all went distant. I picked up the folder with numb fingers and flipped it open. The first page was a legal document. A waiver of inheritance rights. My name. His name. The address of our house. There was a spot for my signature. The second page was something else. A copy of my grandmother's will. The one I had never seen. The one he had told me was nothing. My eyes scanned the lines. I felt like I was reading in slow motion, each word moving through molasses. She left her savings to be split evenly between her son and granddaughter. Not grandson. Granddaughter. Me. She left me her apartment, with the instruction that it be used as a place of safety for as long as I needed it. She wrote, in her own messy handwriting, that she knew what it was to feel like an extra in your own family. I looked up at my father. He knew I had seen it. He had put it there. He told me there was no point in me getting sentimental about it. He said the apartment had been sold after her death to pay off some of his debts. He said there was nothing left of it. He shrugged. He said this waiver was just paperwork catching up to reality. I heard Kayla swear under her breath. I heard Mara say my name sharply. Linda smiled tightly and told me not to make a scene. She said it was just legal stuff. She said I should sign so we could all move on and enjoy the night. If you could have seen my face then, you might have seen how everything in me rearranged. This was not about money. This was about erasure. They had taken something meant for me. Then, instead of apologizing, they wanted me to sign a paper saying I agreed I never deserved anything in the first place. I thought of all the evenings I had stayed late at the community center, helping kids with homework because their parents were working 2 jobs. I thought of all the times I had told them they were worthy, that their lives mattered, that they had rights. I thought of every time I had gone home and let my own father talk to me like my very presence in his house was a debt. I thought of my grandmother's hands, folding laundry, pressing $10 bills into my palm. I heard my father say that if I did not sign, I was stealing from Tyler. He said Tyler would not have a secure home. Tyler did not speak. He stared at the table. My mother, if she had been around, might have said something different. I do not know. She was a ghost in this story. Presented as an example of what not to become. The woman who left instead of staying and taking it. I realized suddenly that maybe she had not been weak. Maybe she had been the first one to see clearly. My hand did not shake when I closed the folder. I did not sign. Not yet. I looked at my father and asked him, in a voice I barely recognized as mine, why he had never told me about Nana's will. He shifted in his seat. He said he had not wanted me to get ideas. Ideas. Like having a place of my own. Like not needing him. He said there was no point anyway. He had needed the money. He said I would have wasted it. I asked what he meant by wasted. He said on some social worker fantasy. He said on rent in a city where I would get chewed up and spit out. He said he had used it for the family. The family. The word sat there like a rotten fruit. I asked if he meant for Tyler's braces. For the vacation they took when I could not come because I was working. For the down payment on the truck. He told me I was being ungrateful. He told me families shared. I told him sharing was when everyone knew what was given and what was taken. I told him this was theft. My aunt tried to intervene. She said maybe this was not the best time for this talk. That we should all calm down. Linda said that this was exactly the best time. That it was better to handle things while everyone was together. She smiled at me across the table. She said I should stop being dramatic. She said it was just paper. She said I had never been interested in the house anyway. She said I was always talking about leaving. And then she said the thing that made the whole table go quiet. She said I owed them this. She said that with all they had done for me, feeding me, clothing me, putting a roof over my head, the least I could do was sign away something I was never going to use. I looked at her. She really believed that. That food and clothes and a roof, the bare minimum a parent is supposed to provide, counted as something I owed them for eternally. My father pushed the pen toward me. He told me to stop dragging it out. He told me to be an adult. He told me if I did not sign, I would regret it. He told me that if I did not sign, I was choosing money over family. I could feel everyone watching. Tyler, eyes darting between us. My aunt, biting her lip. Lily, wide-eyed, taking it all in the way teenagers do when they suddenly see adults as flawed. Kayla, sitting very still, her jaw clenched. Mara, expressionless, but her hand curled tightly around her napkin. I took a breath. I felt strangely calm. I told my father I had a counteroffer. He frowned. He said this was not a negotiation. I said it could be. I said I would not sign anything tonight. I said I wanted time to think. He started to interrupt. I held up my hand. The audacity of that probably shocked him more than anything. I kept going. I said I wanted to see the full financial records from Nana's estate. I said I wanted confirmation of what had been sold, for how much, and where that money had gone. He scoffed. He said I did not trust him. I said he was asking me to sign away my legal rights. Trust was not the issue, legality was. Mara nodded slightly. She said gently that it was reasonable for anyone to ask for documentation. My father snapped at her that this was a family matter. She replied that as someone who worked with a lot of families in crisis, she could attest that transparency prevented a lot of things from blowing up later. He glared at her. He told her she was filling my head with ideas. I almost laughed then. As if my head had been his to fill. I slid the folder back to him. I said I would take the will page, though. Just that page. He told me no. I told him I had already taken a photo with my phone. I had done it while we were talking. His eyes went wide. He had underestimated me. He had always underestimated me. The waiter hovered, unsure if he should bring dessert or evacuate. My father sat back. He said that if I walked out of there tonight without signing, I should not bother coming back. He said I could not have it both ways. I could not be part of the family and refuse to act like it. There it was. The ultimatum. The disownment, framed as my choice. I thought about all the kids at the center who told me about parents who did this exact thing. Who weaponized belonging. I thought about the girl whose father had told her she was dead to him because she refused to drop out of school to work in his failing store. I thought about how I had said to her that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones least capable of doing it well. Then I thought about Nana's handwriting, looping and messy at the bottom of that will, calling me by name. I realized that the only reason my father could take things from me was because I kept pretending he had the right. I did not pick up the pen. I picked up my purse. I stood. Everyone stared. My father told me to sit back down and stop making a spectacle. I told him I was done participating in scenes where I was the villain in a story he had written. My voice shook then. Not from fear. From all the words I had swallowed over the years crashing into each other on their way out. I told him he had already taken what Nana left me once. He was not going to get my signature to bless the theft. If he wanted to cut me off, he was free to do it. But it would be his choice. Not mine. He spluttered something about me being ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment. He said I had picked a useless degree. He said I had turned against my own family. He said if I walked away, I was dead to him. He said it in front of everyone. There it was. No papers needed. Disownment by declaration. I looked at Tyler. For a second, I saw my little brother, the boy who used to curl up next to me on the couch and ask me to read to him. The boy who once cried when I moved into the dorms because he thought I would never come back. His eyes were wet now. He did not say anything. That hurt more than my father's words. Linda folded her arms and said at least now they knew where they stood with me. My aunt told me quietly that I could come to her house if I needed to. I nodded. I looked at Kayla and Mara. They both stood up too. We left together. Outside, under the fairy lights, the night air hit my face like a shock. I leaned against the wall and exhaled shakily. Kayla swore, long and creative. Mara asked if I was okay. I laughed. Then I cried. Right there, in the parking lot, mascara running, graduation gown still folded on the back seat of my car, I cried for the girl who had spent her entire life trying to earn love from people who rationed it like a scarce resource. Between hiccups, I said I had nowhere to go. My father had just cut me off. I could not go back to the house. I could not afford an apartment yet. I had no idea what Nana's old apartment even looked like now. It was probably some stranger's place, my presence erased from its walls. Mara looked at me with an expression I had seen her give clients. The one that meant there is something you do not know yet. She told me she had been holding something back until after graduation. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. She said it had arrived at the center last week, addressed to her care but with my name on it. She said she had opened it just enough to see it was from a law office, then decided to wait until today to give it to me, because she did not want to distract me from exams. My hand shook when I took it. The return address was a firm downtown. Inside was a letter. On their letterhead. My name. Reference to the estate of Margaret Collins. Apparently, there had been an error in the processing of her will. A second account had been discovered. In my name. Created years earlier. With automatic deposits from a small pension she had received. My father had not known about it. It had been separate from the main estate. The amount was not huge. But it was enough. Enough for a deposit. Enough for first and last month's rent. Enough to move. Enough to start. I read the letter 3 times. The edges of the world went sharp again. Mara squeezed my shoulder. She said that sometimes, the dead were better at taking care of us than the living. Kayla wiped my face with a napkin and said we were going apartment hunting tomorrow. In that parking lot, on the night my father tried to get me to sign away my claim to anything that might tie me to him, I found out that my grandmother had tied me to something else instead. A way out. A place of my own, if I chose it. I looked back through the restaurant window. I could see my father at the table, gesturing as he talked, probably rewriting the story of what had just happened into something where he was the victim. I realized, in that moment, that he had already lost the power he thought he was wielding. He could declare me dead to him. He could wave papers. He could shout about loyalty. But he could not change the fact that I had walked away. That part was mine. What I did not know yet, standing there with the letter in my hands and snot on my sleeve, was that my father was not done. He was going to take my defiance as a challenge, not a conclusion. And his next move was going to drag Tyler into the middle in a way that would force me to choose between the boy who still looked at me like I hung the moon and the woman I was trying to become. If you stay with me, I will tell you how that played out, and how the night of my disownment turned into the night I finally admitted the worst betrayal in my family did not come from them. It came from me. Not because I was cruel. Because I finally did the one thing none of them expected. I chose myself over them. I did not sleep the night after my father tried to make me sign away my inheritance. Kayla let me crash on her couch, but my mind was too loud. I lay awake staring at her popcorn ceiling, replaying every word he said like it was burned into the backs of my eyelids. Ungrateful. Selfish. Dead to him. It's wild how easily parents use words that, if spoken by anyone else, would be unforgivable. By sunrise, my face was tight with dried tears and my throat felt raw. Kayla made coffee, the strong kind that tastes like gasoline but wakes up the soul, and sat beside me with that look she gives when she's about to help rebuild my entire life with post-it notes and righteous fury. Mara called at 9. She told me to come to the center. She said she had been thinking about something all night. When I arrived, she led me to her small office, the one with the posters about resilience and the mismatched mugs on the shelf. She closed the door and told me gently that legally, nothing my father did last night was binding. But emotionally? That was a wound that didn't scab quickly. She also said something that made my stomach twist. Grace, this is not over. Men like your father don't let things go quietly. I knew she was right. What I didn't know was how right. That afternoon, I got a text from Tyler. Can you meet me? Please. I hesitated. Tyler hadn't said a word during the dinner meltdown. He had watched, eyes darting between us, frozen in the role he had been trained for, the golden child immune from consequence. But I still loved him. He was my brother before he was their son. So I met him. We picked a park halfway between Kayla's and our neighborhood. He was sitting on a bench under a tree, hood up, picking at the drawstrings like they were the only things holding him together. He didn't look like the Tyler from last night, smug, confident, lounging at the table like the family prince. He looked scared. When he saw me, he stood too fast. His voice cracked when he said my name. He said he hadn't known Dad was going to do that. He said he hadn't known about Nana's will either. He said Dad had kept him in the dark about everything. I believed him. Tyler might be spoiled, irresponsible, and wrapped in layers of privilege he didn't even recognize, but he wasn't cruel. At least, I thought so. He sat back down. I sat beside him. The air smelled like cut grass and sunscreen from the kids playing nearby. Tyler rubbed his eyes and said something that made my heart drop. Dad told me this morning that if I ever talk to you again, he's cutting me off too. I just stared at him. Tyler went on. Dad had a plan now, he said. A plan to prove I wasn't stable. A plan to show that I had always been ungrateful, manipulative, dramatic. A plan to make sure if I ever came after him legally for the inheritance, I'd lose. My chest tightened. Tyler said Dad was collecting evidence. Old texts. Old arguments. Moments taken out of context. And worse. He planned to tell people I had mental health issues. That I was unstable. That I was a danger to myself. That I was not to be trusted. That's why he needed me out. I felt the world tilt. It wasn't enough to cut me out. He needed to justify it. Validate it. Perform it. Something ugly burned in my chest. I whispered, "Why are you telling me this?" Tyler swallowed hard. He said because I was his sister. Because he loved me. Because he didn't know what to do. He said Dad expected him to help. Expected him to back up the story. Expected him to say that I had screamed at him. That I had threatened him. That I had gotten physical once. Tyler looked sick even saying it. None of it was true. But if Tyler said it was, people would believe him. That's when I realized something awful. It wasn't just the inheritance my father was trying to erase. It was my character. My credibility. My future. My whole self. I felt shaky. Cold. Like every part of me wanted to run and collapse at the same time. I told Tyler he didn't have to do what Dad said. He looked at me like a child. Grace, if I don't, where am I supposed to go? I remembered being 18 and feeling like my only choices were their house or no house. He was trapped in a cage he didn't even know was a cage until last night. He started crying. Not loud. Just quiet, terrified tears that made him look younger. I hugged him. Even if we were on opposite sides now, I couldn't switch off being his sister. He whispered in my hair. I'm sorry. But I can't lose everything. My heart cracked. Not because he had betrayed me. But because he was willing to. 2 days later, the first hit landed. My Aunt Denise called me. Her voice was tight. She said she had gotten a message from my father, a long one. He told her I was having emotional issues. That I had caused a scene. That I was unstable. That graduation night had been my breaking point. He told her he was worried I might lash out. He told her I had stolen money from him. Absolute lie. He told her to please be careful. My aunt didn't believe him. She knew him too well. But she called to warn me. And she said something else. He's trying to turn everyone against you, honey. This isn't about money anymore. And she was right. This was punishment. Retribution. A father proving to himself and everyone else that cutting me out was justified. That he was the victim. That he hadn't failed me. I had failed him. The next blow came 24 hours later. My field supervisor, Mara, called me into her office. She looked conflicted. Grace. I received a concerning email this morning. From your father. It accused me of influencing you. Manipulating you. Turning you against your family. He said I had overstepped boundaries. That I was unprofessional. That I was exploiting my position. I went cold. He was coming after my career. Mara wasn't shaken. She had dealt with much worse from unstable family members of clients. But she was worried. She said, you need to decide how far you want to let this go. How far? I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to live my life. But my father wasn't going to let that happen. He needed to feel powerful. He needed someone to blame. He needed to win. Even if winning meant destroying his daughter. That night, the biggest blow came. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Tyler. I'm so sorry. Before I could respond, another message came through. A screenshot. A group chat. A group chat with my father, Linda, and 2 of his cousins. Tyler wasn't supposed to see it. But his phone had lit up while he was in the kitchen. And he saw my name. The messages. Paul, my father. We need Tyler to confirm she's unstable. Otherwise it won't hold up. Linda. He will. He knows what's at stake. Paul. Once she's labeled as having issues, she won't be able to contest anything. We can close this chapter permanently. Cousin Mark. Good. Last thing we need is her coming back in 10 years asking for her share. Linda. Exactly. She's always been dramatic. This is the cleanest way. Paul. Tyler just needs to say she screamed at him, maybe pushed him. Nothing big. Just enough. My vision blurred. My father wanted to create a legal paper trail. To destroy my credibility. To brand me as unstable. So that he could say, "See? She's the problem. Not me. Never me." I called Tyler immediately. He answered whispering. He said he wasn't going to lie. He said he didn't care anymore. He said if Dad cut him off, he'd couch surf at his friend's place. He said he couldn't do this to me. I burst into tears so hard I couldn't speak. Tyler whispered. "Grace. I finally see it. I see how he treats people. I'm sorry it took me so long." For the first time in years, he was choosing me. But the damage was already in motion. And things were about to get worse. Because the next morning, my father showed up at the community center. Unannounced. Loud. Red-faced. Demanding to speak to Mara. He told the receptionist he needed to report me. That I was dangerous. That he feared for his safety. He was performing. Loudly. For witnesses. For narrative. For control. I stepped out of the hallway and saw him. He pointed at me like I was a criminal. "There. That's her. My daughter. She threatened me. She tried to hit me." It was a lie so big it felt cartoonish. Mara stepped between us, calm but firm. Security came. They escorted him out. He shouted the entire way through the lobby. "You're unstable. You need help. You're not right in the head. You're dead to us." Every word echoed off the walls. Clients stared. Staff stared. Kids stared. I stood there, frozen. Humiliated. Bleeding on the inside. Mara put a hand on my back. She whispered. "You did nothing wrong. He's losing control. That's why he's acting like this." But knowing why it was happening didn't make it hurt less. That night, alone in Kayla's apartment, I finally broke. I sat on the floor next to her bed and sobbed until my throat hurt. Not because of the inheritance. Not because of the money. Not even because my father hated me enough to try to destroy my life. I cried because for the first time in my adulthood, I realized a truth so brutal it almost hollowed me out. I had spent years trying to earn love from someone who was never capable of giving it. My biggest betrayal wasn't leaving him. My biggest betrayal was all the years I stayed. All the years I rationalized him. Softened him. Excused him. Protected him. Loved him. Even when he didn't love me. Even when he barely tolerated me. Even when he wanted me erased. That was my betrayal. To myself. The next morning, Mara told me she had made some calls. A lawyer friend. A victim's advocate. A colleague who specialized in family law. We gathered everything. The will. The texts. The screenshots. The messages. Witness statements. The restaurant meltdown. And we built a file. Not to go after him. Not yet. But to protect myself. A legal shield. A barrier. Proof. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't dangerous. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't making things up. He was. He always had been. 2 weeks later, something unimaginable happened. A letter arrived from the law office that had handled Nana's estate. Inside was one sentence that changed the entire trajectory of this war. The sale of Margaret Collins' apartment appears to have involved fraudulent authorization. Fraudulent. My father had forged my signature. The apartment should have been mine. It wasn't about money anymore. This was crime. And suddenly, he wasn't the one with power. I was. Not because I wanted revenge. but because I finally realized my grandmother hadn't just left me money. She had left me proof. Proof that I mattered. Proof that I had been loved. Proof that I wasn't imagining the cruelty I grew up with. Proof that I didn't have to inherit their dysfunction. I could walk away. Completely. Legally. Emotionally. Permanently. What I did next is something people still judge me for. Something I judged myself for too. I pressed charges. Not for revenge. For Tyler. Because if I didn't stop my father now, Tyler would become another version of him. A man who believed power meant shouting until people broke. Because I had already lost a father. I didn't want to lose a brother too. When the police questioned Tyler about the forged signature, he told the truth. Everything. Every detail. Every lie. Every manipulation. I wasn't in the room, but the officer told me later. He looked heartbroken. Like he was destroying the man he wanted to believe in. My father was charged with fraud. He told the entire family I had ruined his life. They believed him. Most of them. But Tyler didn't. My aunt didn't. My grandmother never would have. And for once, that was enough for me. When the court settled the case, the apartment, legally, was transferred to me. My name on the deed. My key in the door. My space. My life. I moved in with nothing but a mattress, a thrift store table, and the echo of my grandmother's handwriting in my head. You deserve something that is yours. I sit now in that same apartment, writing this like I am telling it to a friend with her hands wrapped around a mug, eyes wide, whispering "Oh my God" at the right moments. And if you're wondering what the ending is, what the twist is, what the shock is, here it is. After everything my father did. After every humiliation. After every lie. After trying to erase me from his life. I didn't hate him. I thought I would. I wanted to. God, it would have been easier. But the real twist, the one that still knocks the breath out of me, is this. I grieved him. Not the man he was. The father he never got to be. The father I kept believing might show up someday. The father I built in my head to survive the one who existed. Letting go of him wasn't the betrayal. Holding on to that fantasy for so long was. And the moment I finally stopped loving the father he never was. I finally started loving the woman I was becoming. The first night I slept in my grandmother's apartment, I didn't unpack. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't light a candle or play music or try to make it feel like home. I lay on the bare mattress in a room that still smelled faintly like dust and lavender, and I listened to the silence. Real silence. Not the angry kind that filled my father's house. Not the tense, waiting kind that used to live in my bedroom growing up. Not the heavy silence after an argument I never won. This silence was soft. Welcoming. Patient. The kind of silence that doesn't watch you. Doesn't judge you. Doesn't wait for you to fail.